What is up, guys? I'm Matt. This is MotoWorks. And if you have a BMW G310 that has a charging system issue, well, this is the video for you. I've seen a lot of complaints about these BMW G310s not charging the battery or having battery-related issues. And we finally got a G310 here at the shop that actually is having a charging system issue. So I can actually put a video together for you guys and hopefully it helps you out. Let's first of all talk about how this charging system works on a motorcycle and how it kind of differs from a car. On a car, if you have a charging issue, either your alternator will need to be rebuilt or replaced, or your battery will need to be replaced. You could also have a wiring issue, but mainly on a car, it's either going to be your battery or your alternator. On a motorcycle, there's actually a number of different issues you could run into with a charging system. One, you could have a faulty battery, you could have a faulty stator, or you could have a faulty regulator rectifier. Now in this video here, this bike is not charging the battery, so I'm going to show you guys how to actually test these separate systems or components. So the first thing we're going to do is get started with removing the seat and actually making sure that we have a charging system issue and it's not a battery issue. Alright, now the tools that we're going to be using today, electric screw gun. I prefer using these. You don't need to. Electric screw gun or a ratchet. We'll need a 5mm Allen, either an Allen socket or Allen wrench. Either one works. I recommend either an extension or these extended Allens work really well on certain parts of the bike. A pair of diagonal cutters. You'll also need some zip ties. I don't have those because I don't really need them for this video. I'll need them in the next one. But a pair of wire cutters and a multimeter. Now you want to make sure you have a multimeter, not just a voltmeter, because you want to make sure that you can measure volts AC, volts DC, as well as ohms. Now this multimeter has an audible ohms reader, so these work a little bit better, but just make sure you have a way of measuring DC voltage, AC voltage, as well as resistance or ohms resistance. But that's the stuff we need. Let's get started. If you don't know how to remove the seat on a BMW, it's pretty straightforward. Just put the key in the keyhole on the left side of the bike, lift up and slide back on the seat, and that's how you remove the seat. All right, now once we have the seat off the bike, it gives us access right to the battery. I mean, the battery is very easily seen. It's right here. This is the negative terminal of the battery, and this is the positive terminal of the battery. So we're just going to want to remove or pull back the boot that covers the positive terminal of the battery. And we'll just take our multimeter, we'll just set it to DC voltage with the solid voltage lines above there. And then we will check our battery first, because a lot of times a charging system issue could be just as simple as a battery that's not in good shape, and the only thing that you need to do is replace the battery. Now a battery can fail for a number of reasons. It can fail because it's old and it's just not in a good state of health anymore. It could also fail because a cell has dropped out of the battery. There's a number of reasons that batteries can fail, so you always want to make sure that you check your battery first before you diagnose a charging system further, because you got to have a good battery in order to properly diagnose a charging system. So with that multimeter set to volts DC, we're just going to take and hook up red to red, black to black, and hold that on there as best you can. Alrighty, so once we have those tester leads on there. We'll just check our battery. Now a good battery will have a voltage above 12.4 volts. All right, now as you can see, this one's at about 12.8 volts. We can check that with the key on and see if it drops a lot. Pull the key. All right, with the key on, we'll wait till that stabilizes there. The key on, it dropped a little bit, about 12.5 volts, still above 12.4 volts. So I would say that this battery is in good condition. All right, so once you verify that the battery is in good shape, you want to then start the bike up, and you should have voltage that is above your resting voltage. So this one was at 12.5 volts with the key on. So when I start the bike, I really want to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 13.5 to 14 volts with the bike running. So that's what we're going to do now. We're just going to start the bike up. Now, as you saw, the voltage started to go down. I think it went down as far as 11, somewhere in the 11 volt range. But you see the bike was still running. So a lot of times people aren't going to recognize a charging issue right away. Your bike will still run. This bike would still ride down the road even though that battery isn't being charged. Because all the charging system is built to do is charge the battery. The battery is what actually provides the power to let the bike run. So as long as the battery still has decent power, the bike will still run until the battery just doesn't have enough voltage to keep the bike running. So you could have a charging issue, and sometimes that's why when you're riding your bike and your bike shuts off and then it won't restart, it could just be that your charging system is faulty, and it's not necessarily always your battery. So just a little piece of advice there, you could still have a charging system issue even though your bike runs and will run for a little while. Could still be a charging system problem. Now that we've checked the charging system and we see that it's not putting out charging voltage, what we'll do now is we'll actually go and access the different components and test those individually. All right? So the first thing we're going to do is gain access to the regulator, rectifier, and stator plug. All right? And I'll show you how to do that now. All right, now in previous videos, guys, I have removed this tank before, this tank cover. I'm not really going to show you how to remove it. I'm just going to show you the bolts you need to remove. And if you're a little unsure on how to remove it, just check out one of these videos here that I've done previous where I actually show removing this tank cover. All right, there's a bolt that's right down here underneath the steering neck. That's where this long Allen comes in handy. There's a bolt here underneath the BMW emblem pretty much on the left side there. Remove that bolt. There's another bolt here. One bolt here. Another bolt here. Another bolt here. And to make it easier, there are 4 bolts, 2 on each side here as well as here. I don't remove them, but I recommend you remove them because it's a little bit easier to take this tank cover off if you do remove these, but that's up to you. It's a little difficult for me to remove them with them on the lift because it's hard for me to get in there to remove that stuff, but if you want to, remove those. And with those bolts out, we'll be able to remove that tank cover. And then you also need to remove this left side cover, which is just a bolt here. And then there are 2 bolts here, one down here. I'll point with my little pointer, one there, and then another bolt up here. Move those 2, and then that side cover will come off. Now you could use tools to remove it, or you could do it the Motorworks way, which to me is a little bit easier. You just touch what you want to remove. I mean, it's just as simple as that. When you work on these things a lot, you know, pieces just fall off. So one little piece of advice when you're removing these screws, if it goes into a painted plastic part, there is a little clear plastic washer that goes between the bolt and the actual painted part to keep it from messing up the painted surface. So just make sure that you remember that anything that goes into something painted will have that plastic washer. If it's the first time you're taking apart the bike, these washers sometimes tend to stick in the painted parts, so just look for those and make sure that they go back in there. That'll keep those plastics from getting all galled up and the paint peeling around there. Just a little piece of advice. Alright, now that we have the left side cover off as well as the tank cover off, we now need to remove the ECU. That's what this is. There's 3 bolts that secure it. There's one here, a bolt here, as well as a bolt here. We're also going to want to cut this zip tie here. There's another zip tie here that we want to cut, and there's a 3rd zip tie that we want to cut, but we'll do that after we take the ECU out. So remove those 3 bolts and those 2 zip ties right now. Alright, now we need to remove this zip tie here. So clip this zip tie here. Move that. Now that will give you access to remove this plug here. There's another zip tie here. Cut that. Alright. And then we can slide that wire out of the way. And we can pull this plug out so we can disconnect it. Alright. Now we got room to move that plug. And once we have that plug removed out here, we can unhook that plug. All you gotta do is lift up on that little gray clip there, and then that plug should come apart. Alrighty, so let's talk about the charging system on a motorcycle a little bit. The plug we just disconnected, one part of the plug or the wiring goes to this, which is the regulator rectifier, and then the other half of it goes to the stator, which is behind this cover here. All right, so you'd have to remove this cover to show you the stator, but probably not going to do that in this video. I'm going to save that for another one. But simply put, to explain the charging system and how it works, the stator is just a bunch of coiled up wires, typically made out of copper, that sit inside of a magnetic flywheel, or magneto as they call it. Now as this magneto spins, it creates alternating current. Now I don't know exactly how that happens. I'm sure there's people much smarter than I am that can actually explain how that process works. I just know that it works, and when you test at this plug, you should be getting alternating current. All right, now since the bike does not run on alternating current, it then continues to go up to the regulator rectifier. All right, now the regulator rectifier's job is to take alternating current, which is a wavy line, and turn it into direct current, which is a solid line, and that is what your bike is designed to run on. That's what charges the battery, is direct current. So this needs to convert the alternating current from the stator to direct current so it can keep your battery charged up. So those are the 2 components of the charging system. On cars, the alternator is all of this in one component. So a lot of times you will have these individual components fail on a car, but it's much easier just to take it somewhere, have them rebuild it, and then give it back to you rebuilt. But basically they're doing the same thing. It's just not separate like it is here on the motorcycle. All right, so we can test the stator. I have not figured out a way to test the regulator rectifier yet. If you guys have a way of doing it, leave it in the comments. Any way that a manual has told me to check this, I can never get those readings to work. I just know that if your stator checks out fine, then the common problem is your regulator rectifier. All right, another way to kind of tell if your regulator rectifier is bad, typically if your regulator rectifier fails, your battery will be overcharging, meaning it'll be getting more than 14.5 volts, probably somewhere in the 16, 17 volt range. Is usually a sign that your regulator rectifier is bad. If your battery is not charging, which is the case for this bike, I suspect that we're going to find the issue lies within the stator. But let's test this stator and see if it's working or not. Alrighty, one simple way to test this is you want to first see if this stator is shorting out to ground. Alright, and if take our multimeter here, got this little guy down here, that's just telling you that it's audible ohms. So if there is a positive connection to ground, it will sound like this. So if I just touch these two together, it'll beep. That means that there's continuity to whatever. That means that it's completing a circuit and it's shorted out to ground. So the first thing we want to check, and the easiest thing to check, is if this stator is shorted out to ground. If you get any noise at all when doing this test, that means you need to replace the stator and figure out where it's actually shorting to ground. It might be a potential issue in the wiring harness or in the stator itself, but in either case, it should not be shorting out to ground. Touch it to that wire there, and then just check it to a bolt here, which should be grounded out. We'll do that with each wire. It's not shorted out to ground. I'm going to test to make sure it works. And it does. It was not shorted out to ground. Next thing we want to do is see if this stator is putting out alternating current. And that's easy. All we're going to do is switch our tester over to AC volts. So right there, AC volts. And then all we have to do is just check each wire against itself. So that one and that one, that one and that one, that one and that one. It doesn't matter. Any way you test, you just want to touch two of the wires with the test lead, and it should be putting out alternating currents. So that's what we're going to check now. All right, so 1 point something volts, and it drops down to 0.6 volts. So this stator is bad. Now, for reference, I actually have another G310 this far apart, and I will show you what you should see as far as AC volts are concerned. So here's this one with the bad stator. I have this one that does have a good stator, and I'll show you that it is charging the battery, and I'll show you what you should see output-wise on a good stator. Alright, so first want to check our battery voltage again. 12.58. We'll see what it drops to on the... Turn the key on. So it drops down to about 12.2. This would probably be a battery I would recommend getting charged. Even if the charging system works, I would charge this back up to get 12.4. But we'll see if it's enough to start the bike, and then we'll check the charging system, see where it's at. So it started at 12.2, so it should be higher than that. Now, since this has a good charging system, I can actually show you what a good stator should put out in terms of AC voltage. And we'll unplug the stator. Make sure that clips out. Unplug it. And then again, we're just going to check the voltage. Those three plugs there. Alrighty, so as you saw, the voltage will just keep increasing as you rev the engine up. It's the job of the regulator rectifier to make sure that your battery is getting the proper amount of volts. So I always say, if your stator tests good and it's putting out AC voltage across all three of these posts in any formation that you check them, you're getting AC voltage and it's not shorted to ground, meaning none of these wires are making continuity to ground, then your problem is either in the wiring itself, could be melted. So you always want to check and make sure that your wiring is in good condition and that your wiring isn't rubbed through anywhere. You know, as long as that's in good shape, then more than likely your regulator rectifier is going to be the problem with the charging system. Again, I don't have a test on the regulator rectifier to tell if it is good or if it is bad. The only way I know is if my stator is good or bad, because I can physically test voltage. I can test if it's has continuity to ground, but I can't do that on the regulator rectifier. Again, I haven't found a test to actually test this. If you guys have any tests that work, let me know in the comments below and I will give that a shot. But that is going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for checking the video out. I hope it was helpful for any of you that are having a charging system problem with your BMW G310 or any other bike. This also will work for other motorcycles out there. As always, thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. We'll see you in the next video, guys. As soon as I get a stator for this, I'll show you how to install it. Thanks for checking it out, guys. See you around.